This is a series covering a couple of techniques that I've used in this scene. We have a rocket with fake 3D fins that rotate around it. There's a technique for the northern lights, and there's also a smoke technique at the bottom here coming out of the rocket. So this video will focus on making the rocket and the rotating fins. So if we make a new composition and call this rocket, if we make this 1920 by 1080, we can go into Illustrator, and I've already got a design layer set up here which I'm going to use Overlord to push it into After Effects. What you can do is save it as an Illustrator file, drag it in, convert the vector layer to shapes, but Overlord is much quicker and I'd recommend everyone using it because it saves a ton of time. Next up, we will go and take the details layer and push that in as well. We take the rocket layer, duplicate it, drag it above the details and use that as an alpha matte, so it will hide the extra parts and just show it through. And next up, we're going to create the fins, but what we need to do is drag the rocket layer into a new composition so it's all contained within this comp. This makes it easier to change the design later on or to replace it. When you're using 3D layers, alpha mattes and masks and things always tend to get a bit messed up, so we're going to keep it in its own pre-comp just to keep everything working alright. So I'm just going to take one of these fins and push that in, and you see that it all lines up when you use an Overlord. All of the layers come in exactly as they are in Illustrator. So I'm going to make this a 3D layer, and if you look up here in the corner, we're going to change this to Cinema 4D and use that renderer. Toggle down to the geometry options and change the extrusion depth to something like 20. Come down here and change the camera view to maybe right, and you can see how thick that is. So that's looking good. Change that back to the active camera, and what I'm going to do actually is delete this bit of the design because that's one of the fins and we're going to make these in 3D space. So again, I'm using a script here to create a null, and the null object is going to be what drives the rotation of these fins. So you can just go like right click, new, null object, but this creates it with the anchor point in the center and it's ready for us to rotate around. So what I'll do is I'll duplicate this fin and let's call this fin 1, parent fin 1 to the null, rotate that after we've made it a 3D layer. I'm going to rotate on the y-axis and we'll push this around 90 degrees. So the original fin is parented to that null, but this one's left here. So what we're going to do is duplicate it, name this one fin 2 and parent that to the null. Again, push it around an extra 90, and what you can do is you can add maths into this text box here. So it's 90 plus another 90, and it will just push both these fins that are parented round, and then we'll duplicate this, call that one fin 3, parent that one last time, push it round an extra 90, and then we will have the last fin 4 and parent that. So if we change this back to 0, all of the fins are attached to this null now, so they rotate around it in 3D space, but obviously you can see that the fins are showing up through the rocket. So that's why we pre-composed it. If I press a U on the keyboard, if we now make this rocket 3D layer, it will mask all of the fins that are going behind it. So again, come down to active camera, change it to a side view, and you can see how this layer is right in the middle and the fins are going behind and in front of it. So using the Y rotation, we have 3D fins that rotate around the rocket. So you don't have to do this next step, but I like to rig the rocket so that we can come and change it later on and add our new designs in, or save this as a template so that you can create a rocket without having to do all this rigging next time. So if we take all of the fins and up in this box here type in path, it will bring up all of the path options for these 4 fins. So if we use fin 1 as the root, starting with fin 2, we'll use the Alt and stopwatch button to link this path to the path of fin 1. So now this expression is taking the path of fin 1, so we'll copy that, again go to fin 3, alt click and paste that expression in, and fin 4 path, alt click and paste that expression in. So nothing seems to have changed, but now if we use fin 1, so that's this one here, pressing G for the pen tool, we can take the point and adjust all of the fins at the same time. So that, coupled with rigging the rocket itself in its own pre-comp, means that at any point we can just change the design and the rig will still be intact. But this doesn't sell the rotation as much as if we move these details around with it. So what we have to do is, I would suggest leaving the rotation of this null at 0 and parenting it to a new null that can drive the rotation and the position of the rocket so that we don't get confused. So if we call this rocket rotation, and that is the fins, and what we're going to do is parent that null to the rotation, and going down to the effects panel we're going to get an angle control. So what this does is creates an angle control up here that we can use and link to things with expressions. So again, if we take the fins, press Alt and on the stopwatch, brings up this expression panel, and we're going to link to the angle control that we made on the rotation null, and we don't have to worry about that anymore. So now this will drive the rotation of those fins, and if we lock on the effects controls panel this angle, what this lock does is, if we were to uncheck this and go to the rocket, you can see that it disappears, whereas if we go back and press the lock button and move into our new composition, the effect still stays there, which means that we can link to it through expressions. So to get the details to move along with the rotation, what we'll do is we're going to right click, separate dimensions, which means we can move them separately along the horizontal and vertical axis. We will press Alt and on this stopwatch link it to the angle control. At the moment it's 0, so it's going to change the position of this layer to 0, which pushes it along to here. But the original value is still there behind the expression, which means we have to plus the value, which means it's going to add the original number that we have written in here to this number. So that means that it's positioned it back to where it was before. And if we go back into the other composition and we start changing this rotation value, you can see that the fins rotate and the details rotate, but they're going in the opposite direction at the moment. So we need to add just a little bit more code onto this. And just before we add the value, we need to put this link in a set of brackets, and we will times -1. That means that whatever the value of this angle controller, so this whole section here is a link to the angle controller up here, we're timesing that by -1, so we're going to get a negative version of this number and add back on our original value. So moving into this composition, now when we rotate, they will both rotate at the same speed around the same time in the same direction. So that will kind of sell the rotation a bit more, it'll make it look more realistic, and because we've got two versions of the details within this layer, when it gets to about 180, which would be half a rotation, we can take this group and move it into position. So this means that at 0 we have the details facing forward, and then as we rotate round at 180, halfway round, we've got a second set of details. This works for one rotation, but as soon as you get back to one full rotation, we don't have any more of this layer to show through on the rocket. So what we could do is duplicate this design again and again, but that still wouldn't create an infinite loop. So if you wanted to rotate the rocket 10, 20 times, it would just become tedious having a whole string of these details. So alternatively, what you can use is the script that I've made called loop control. Get rid of this position keyframe here, and that will snap the details back to its original position. We're going to set up a keyframe on the position and move forward, say 1 second, and move it so that the second set of details is in view. And we're going to press N on the keyboard, right click in this work area and trim the comp. So that is 1 second loop of the details going round. Go back into the original composition. You can see that that 1 second has made the composition much shorter. So what we're going to do is go to loop control and just click that. So the loop has now stopped and the details don't move anymore. That's because the time remapping has been linked to this angle control. So again, all of the things linked to angle controls because they come back around to themselves, and the fins and everything will run off of these controls. And now the details will continuously and infinitely go on because they're just running through this cycle, but you can keyframe and link it. So here we have the original one that's on the rocket rotation layer. So again, we're going to click the lock here, go down to the rocket, and in this pre-composition we have the effects and the new loop control angle. So if we reset that, alt click on it to bring up the expression and link it to our original fins rotation, that means that now our rocket will infinitely spin with the fins. These don't need to use loop control because they're within this layer. All they're doing is rotating. So now everything is linked to this one angle control which can continue on infinitely. So the fins and the details rotate again and again, and you can animate this in whatever way. The fact that earlier on we rigged our fins so that we can change the design, I'm going to show you how easy it is to swap it out. So we have a design already. I'm just going to click on one of the fins and Control or Command copy. Go back into After Effects and go down to fin 1, again type in path. So we reveal the path, and clicking on the text we just Control or Command paste. And that brings in our new fins, but we can see that they're a bit close. So because they're all rigged to the scale and position of this path, all we have to do is double click, drag it out, and the whole rig will change. So we'll deal with that in a second, but we'll go back into the pre-comp, hide the details for the moment because obviously they don't apply to this new design, and we'll take this rocket structure, we'll push that into After Effects, hide the other one, and we'll just leave it at that for the moment. So here we have the fins. Go down to fin 1 again, double click on the path, and now we can position that to where we want it in correlation to this new design. So maybe we'll change the color a bit as well. So that would be something that you might have to rig separately. You can control all of the colors from one fin, or maybe you highlight all of them and you can just change the color like that. But we've literally just swapped out the pre-composition of the rocket and the fin path, and now we go back to our rocket rotation. So this is all now still rigged to the original controller. So we'll just reset this controller, and if we make sure the rocket pre-comp is parented to the rotation, this layer isn't 3D at the moment, so you can animate the position and it should work fine. Animate the rotation, but as soon as you change the scale, the rotation will start to look a bit weird. And that is just fixed by making this control layer a 3D layer as well. And then you'll be able to have a fully rigged rocket with the rotation around it. And if you use loop control, then you'll also be able to use the details and infinitely kind of spin this rocket, and it's all controlled by this one layer. So you can save this as a template, just save the After Effects file in a different folder somewhere, create your template, and then you can start creating a new rocket every time with this rig as a base. And that's how we kind of got to this stage. Yeah, let me know if creating this rig has helped you, or if you have any questions. Like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.